Lecturer, author, and activist Marianne Williamson has set her sights on the Oval Office. She may just be the most unconventional candidate in the Democratic primary field, which is not a bad thing in my book. Some parts of her platform include universal background checks for guns, ban of assault weapons, and what she calls a realignment of federal resources to invest in the lives of children. Yesterday, Williamson announced that she signed the American Promise Pledge to support a constitutional amendment which would reform campaign financing, in effect undoing the Citizens United decision. And tonight she hits the debate stage, and her performance may be make or break in terms of her presidential bid. And she joins me now via Skype. Marianne, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's great to be with you.
All right, so looking forward to the debate. What is it that you want the American people to know about you and what you are fighting for?
I want the American people to see who I am as a woman. I think that people are watching not only for what your policies are, but for who you are. I think the person who is our president, the character of the person, the sensibility of the person, the basic outlook of the person is as important as their policies. I feel very strongly that our government has strayed from its real democratic mission, because in a country like ours, a democracy, the government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And over the last 40 years, our government has strayed, and it has become more a government of a few of the people, by a few of the people, and for a few of the people, of multinational corporations, by multinational corporations, for multinational corporations. And our government now is little more than a system of legalized bribery. It does more to advocate for short-term profits, for a great matrix of corporate power, than it does to advocate for us. I think people know this. I think we need to own what we know and be willing to interrupt the pattern by which the government has become so degraded. We need to return our government and our society to the real democratic and humanitarian values that have always made us great.
See, I think people do, to a large extent, know that. And I mean, everything that you just said makes common sense to me. And yet there's been this media narrative or media portrayal of you as wacky or kooky or somehow unserious. What do you say to that?
What I say to that is that, of course they do. I am a disruptor, as they say. The political media establishment is invested in enabling those same corporate forces. The money that those corporate forces put into our political campaigns, the flood of corporate money that keeps so many of them in power, and in fact, so much of that corporate money that goes into advertising on that same media, in those same media channels. So, of course, the establishment sees me as a real threat to the status quo. I am a threat to the status quo. That's the point. And it's up to the American people to decide whether or not they want to go with the status quo or go with a genuine disruptor. Now, in the last presidential election, they wanted to go with a genuine disruptor, too. And the only two candidates who were talking genuine disruption were Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Unfortunately, they went with a disruptor who was someone who claimed to be someone who was a change agent, is certainly not a change agent except in the most destructive ways. He's an agent of chaos, not an agent of change. In fact, he's only screwed the screws in tighter on the system, protecting the system by which corporate power is in charge. So in a way, the fact that people are so invested in creating this false narrative about me as the crystal lady, wacky new age nutcase, if you really think about it, I must be doing something right that they're so scared, don't you think, Crystal?
I think there may be something to that. You know, I think what you're getting at is, to me, the most important question in this presidential contest, right? People can say whatever they want. They can lay on all their white papers. They can lay on all their policy prescriptions. But how are you actually going to change a system, which I agree with you, is fundamentally corrupt, is fundamentally broken, right? There's not going to be any sort of incremental, let me work across the aisle and make the sort of changes that need to be made for this country to be okay. So what is your view of how you actually overturn that status quo that is so threatened by you?
Well, first of all, the American people need to face what you just said. A certain kind of wonkiness isn't going to do it. Certain kind of incremental change isn't going to do it. The system has become more than broken. People say our system is broken. It's not just broken. It's corrupt to the core. It's not just that our economy isn't working for everyone. It's that our economy has become completely taken over by corporate forces. So what we need is a power that is greater than the power that is represented by this president. This president is not just a politician. This president is a phenomenon. And a insider politics game will not defeat him, Crystal. The only thing that will defeat this phenomenon is another phenomenon. And the phenomenon that will defeat him, which is the answer to your question, is the spiritual awakening in this country. Spirituality is just the path of the heart. It is heartless. In the richest country in the world, it is heartless to deny education to a child. In the richest country in the world, it is heartless to deny health care to people. It is heartless to desecrate your planet, possibly imperiling the survivability of future generations. It is heartless to pass policy after policy, which makes it easier for those who already have wealth to gain more wealth and harder for people who don't have any to even create any at all. It is heartless to allow an amoral economic system to be your new false god to which you bow, as opposed to principles of goodness and decency. Now, if the American people really get that, which I believe we do in our personal lives, people get that being a good person is more important than anything else. But we need to realize that's not only true for a person, it's true for a country. We can't be great if we're not good. And when I think this mass awakening that has already happened politically in this country, when it is matched by an awakening of the heart, we are going to override the forces that are represented by this country, but by this president. But even more importantly, we will override those forces in such a way that they will not be able to just come back in 2022 and 2024.
I think that's the most important thing, because what scares me is that we have someone who maybe is able to defeat Trump because he's incompetent, and people, I think, frankly, a lot of them are just sick of him, but they don't fix those underlying issues. So if you were president, what would your administration look like? How would you govern that would be fundamentally different from some of the other candidates?
Well, we have to address deeper issues. We have to be willing to be more honest. We need to be willing as a society to recognize the error of our ways, to really recognize all the ways in which we have sold out the American people. We have a government, as I said, that does more to advocate for corporations than to advocate for us. We have become a system of legalized bribery. So we need, first and foremost, to, as you were talking before about the pledge for constitutional amendment, either with legislation or through a constitutional amendment, we have absolutely got to get rid of the nefarious influence of corporate money on our politics. That's the cancer that underlies all the other cancers. That's why, for me, this would be top priority.
Oh, sorry, go on, continue.
Second of all, we need to repeal that 2017 tax cut. $2 trillion and 83 cents of every dollar went to the richest people among us and the richest corporations, put back in the middle class tax cuts, stop those corporate subsidies. We gave $26 billion to the fossil fuel companies alone, make it so that, yes, the U.S. government will be negotiating with big pharma for drug prices, raise your minimum wage, allow people to go to college, free tuition at state colleges and universities, and get rid of as much of that college loan as possible. As soon as you do that, it's almost going to be audible, because there will be such an infusion of economic hope and opportunity into the life of the average American. That's number one. The debilitating effect of all of that chronic economic tension and anxiety, this is keeping people from producing. This is keeping people from creating. That's where wealth comes from. Wealth comes from people unleashing their dreams. And so that is why I also recognize that in order for us to be prosperous in every way that prosperity matters, we need to educate our children. That's why we have got to stop basing our educational funding only on property taxes. I want every single school in America to be a palace of learning and culture and the arts. And I also want, in addition to a Department of Children and Youth, which will cover an entire array of recognizing and dealing with and solving the tremendous chronic trauma of millions of American children, we also must begin to wage peace as effectively as we now prepare for war. That's why I want a United States Department of Peace. Right now, we only put a fraction of the resources into peace building that we put into our military budget. That has got to be changed. I also want to do a deep dive into racial reconciliation in this country, Crystal, because it is such an underlying turbulence that continues to be a toxicity that we just hand from generation to generation. That's why I want reparations for slavery. So absolutely, between my economic policies, my policies related to children, my policies related to peace, and my policies related to race, you elect me president, and we're going to have a new day in America, and a new day is exactly what we need.
How do you fit Trump into the global rise of right-wing individuals with sort of autocratic tendencies? How does he fit into that pattern?
How he fits into it is a major voice within it. It is a rising threat. He is a he is a megaphone for white nationalism in the United States. And unfortunately, he is also a megaphone for this kind of autocratic, right-wing, really fascistic tending pattern throughout the country. I think people underestimate the danger represented by this presidency at their peril. It's very dark, some of what he's doing, what he's been doing in the last few days, between the very idea that Dan Coats will no longer be leading our national intelligence agencies, and instead one of the president's minions will be there, giving the president complete cover for just ignoring what the American intelligence agencies are saying. He's already put his minions into the EPA. He's already put his minions into the Department of Justice. It's kind of like, well, Czechoslovakia fell, now Poland's falling. This is very, very dangerous. Even yesterday, we had another mass shooting in California. And sure enough, the young man who did the shooting had posted a book about white nationalism on his Facebook right before he did this. The FBI has been saying for a very, very long time, and many in the Republican Party have tried to squash this message, that the most dangerous element that threatened us in terms of domestic terrorism was domestic white nationalism. We should not underestimate the danger of the fact that a voice for that white nationalism is now in the White House. He took off after the Squad. He took off after Elijah Cummings. Today he took off after Al Sharpton. You know, it's not hyperbole to say that if you didn't know better, you'd think he was stoking a race war.
Marianne, I have more I want to get to with you. Can you stick around? We can take a quick break and come right back.
Sure. Thank you.
We'll have more with Marianne Williamson right after this.